Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call to order the 14-mile Watershed Alliance meeting for December 13th. Welcome all. So our Zoom setup is working, right?
Should be good to go. I'll just
Okay,
verify
super.
real
Thank you.
quick with Karen.
So
Can you hear us
roll
okay?
call from my right,
Barb, you're right.
Dave Trudeau, Kill Rockenbach.
Don Easted. And Bob Binkowski had called me just for the meeting, and they're en route from Milwaukee, so they probably won't be here in time. But,
I
so-
think Karen's
And
on.
Karen's
on
on.
And
Zoom.
Karen is on. So, have y'all had a chance to look at the meeting or the meeting minutes for November 8th? So could I have a motion to approve?
I move to accept the minutes of the meeting.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, very good. So we'll move to announcements. First, my first announcement, I'm very pleased to welcome Kyle Kettner, who is in his third week now as an Adams County Land and Water employee. And he is it a soil agronomist? Is that the right term?
I'm the watershed agronomist.
Watershed agronomist, and he's the person we've been looking for so long that ride herd over the 9-kilometer plan. So Kyle, could you take a couple minutes and just introduce yourself, tell us about your background and how we can work in synergy here? All right.
Kyle, if you wouldn't mind, if you want to stand up here just so folks in front of us can see you.
Sure. Guys gotta move the podium, huh? Oh, man, I'm gonna have to take a seat, huh? Yeah, I moved to bring all tree limbs higher off the ground. All right, my name's Kyle. I just started about 3 weeks ago. I have a master's in soil science and my background's in biology with a focus on aquatic ecology and biology there. And I did a stint with NRCS over in Westfield for a while. And now I'm here for watershed projects. I'm actually really quite excited about this project. My master's thesis was focused largely on adopting conservation on the county and watershed scale and kind of studying what drives those adoptions and where they take place and how to identify priority areas and what kind of goes into that process for tracking it and implementing and outreaching those projects. So the 9 key element plan kind of reads very much into that, and I'm pretty excited to jump back into that field of research that I had done after working in natural resources here. So
Good deal. And I will just ask anyone joining us online today if you have any questions for Kyle.
Hi, Kyle.
Can you hear me? I just wanted to make sure that you were open to getting together and working on a brochure for the 9 key element plan.
yes, I would also like, if we have some graphic elements we can start with. I'm slowly, the project first here is going to involve a lot of outreach and engagement and communication. So that's going to be kind of a key priority. Part of that's going to be, I want to put together, I have a geodatabase, a geographic information system that I'm kind of building up for a story map online that I think we could either host on the Watershed Alliance or the Land and Water website. So any kind of like graphical elements that we use for a brochure could double dip into that. And I think that'd be kind of a good early project to get in on, is sort of that general advertising material.
And will you be at the Land and Water Conservation Department at
Yeah.
Adams County?
Yep, I'm on, at 401 Adams Street. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
down to the basement with Anna and everyone else, so.
Well, I'd love to have your email and I'd love to connect with you so we could get started on that.
Okay, yeah, I can shoot you an email here. Let me get your name off the bottom of the screen here. That's one convenient thing with Zoom is you can shoot an email, but I've only got half of the deal here.
Glad to have you on board.
Kyle, if it's okay with you, I'll share your email in the chat for
Yeah.
Zoom as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Anna.
Any other questions for Kyle? Right, yeah, we're very happy for Kyle.
Thank you much.
Look forward to working with you. And thanks for coming to see us.
It was fun because, you know, what I wasn't able to do at the NRCS is I wasn't able to buckle down on one project. It's a very shotgun thing. It's like this and that, jumping around from deadline to deadline. And this is going to be an opportunity to buckle down. And this is my exclusive priority. So it's really, really interesting to be able to do that. And really
Love,
take a deep
love
dive. So,
hearing that. Yes, that's great. All right, thanks again. Next item, I'm leaving for Arizona at pretty close to the start of the year. And so I won't be here for about 3 months. And so I'll have spotty access to the internet. And so what I've done is I put together 3, if you will, recommended agendas for January, February, and March. I've arranged speakers for January. It'll be Scott Provost and Colton Hutchinson. They'll be talking about the denitrification project. They did a really excellent presentation to the Adams County Drainage Board. So they're going to repeat that. And that'll open it up for questions from all of us. And then in March, I've asked Pat Oldenburg to come and to speak about the TMDL project in the Wisconsin River Basin, talk about the status of it. Most all of us here know Pat. We've seen him at some of our meetings, and so he works closely with our friends at Piedmont and Castle Rock, and looking forward to hearing that from Pat if I can access it. So he'll be our speaker, and then I put together an agenda, a suggested agenda for February. And I think at about that time, we need to start planning what our launch is for the season, if you will. And so I put together a number of things for that. Barb and Dave have the 3 agendas because I won't be here. Certainly you have free reign to do what you want with the agendas. And I would recommend that you kind of attack it as a committee and modify it as you want. And I'll try to join you guys if I can, but I can't really run it remotely. So I appreciate your work with that. So any questions about the agendas? So the somewhat related to that, Phil had sent out an email recently, and I sent out an email a few weeks ago, and so I really appreciate what we've done. I think we've accomplished a lot. But what I see as the president of our group is that we're actually dwindling as an organization. And I think what happens is that puts more work on each one of us. And what I would like to do is to have take the list that Phil has distributed, and for those of us on our board and our committee, have a look at that and see if there's some names of folks who we may have met over this past season who we might want to recommend as individuals to join our committee as advisors or whatever other term you might want to use. And I think what we need to do for this coming year is really expand our access to folks somewhat, just so that it's easier to schedule things. And when there are big activities to do, like our State of Our Lakes, or if it's farmers markets, that we've got a larger number of people to draw from to assist with that. So I'd appreciate it if you would take a look at the list that Phil has put out, and if a name stands out, or even if you know somebody beyond that, a neighbor or someone we work with in other pursuits in our community, make a recommendation. I think we need to, our group needs to be bigger rather than smaller. So appreciate that. Anything you would say about that list, Phil?
Gus.
Oh, Gus. Yeah.
Where's the list that you already have?
Oh, okay. We've just distributed amongst our group, but I think if you'd like to have the list, we can get it to you.
Yeah, happy to send.
Yeah, and if anybody else wants it to have a look at it, just give me a shout, or Phil, send us an email. We'll get it to you. Did you have any comments about the list, Phil?
Well, it's just the folks that have signed up at our booth over the
last year. Farmers market, festivals, state of our lakes, and tried to include all the information I had about each of the individuals, including date when they would have signed up on our newsletter list, and address and phone if available. If you need, if there's someone on there, we can certainly get additional information if there would be help. Anyway, spend some time with it, please. We need ideas. Thanks, Phil. Thanks for your help with that. The next item in terms of announcements, I'd heard from Scott Provost, and Scott approached me and perhaps others sometime back, and the Wisconsin Lakes Conference is looking for people to do a presentation. And what Scott had proposed is to get together lakes groups like ours and to co-present and talk about how we build capacity within a group, which is near and dear to our heart, right? And so Scott got approval for it. So we will be co-presenting with, I think, 3 other lake groups. And that will be, I believe that session is on the Friday. So that would be April, let's say about April 8th or something like that, sometime early in April. And so we'll talk more about that at some later point. But I think that's really good. I think we've got a good story to tell. It'd be nice to be a part of that presentation. So, and as I say, we'll talk more about that later. If anybody's got a question, I'm happy to take a question about it. If not, I think we're good to go. All right. So the next item on the agenda is I want to introduce our presenter today. Some of us have had the pleasure of hearing his presentation. Dreux Watermolen works for the DNR, and his position, and Dreux, correct me if I don't have it right, because I've done a little research, and your scope is so broad. You do so many things in the DNR that I may not cover them, but I think I understand that Dreux is a natural resources program manager for the DNR. He works with social science research programs. Do I have it correct so far, Dreux?
Yeah, you're doing great.
Okay, so what I'll do is for those who don't have the agenda in front of them, I'll just read from the introduction that Dreux and I had actually put together some time back. So what we've asked Dreux to do is to provide an understanding of the process of engaging with our community. And it's been said that conservation problems are social and economic, not scientific. What options are available to us when gathering input from stakeholders in our 14-mile watershed? And how can surveys help us to understand the opinions, knowledge, and behaviors of stakeholders? And how would stakeholders like us to connect and work with them? And how do we determine the issues most important to the variety of people in our lakes and upstream area? And how can the DNR help us to connect with our watershed community? And what expertise and funds might be available to us? So that's a tall order, isn't it, Dreux?
I think, yeah, we're in for a ride.
All right, good. Well, thanks. Without further ado, welcome Dreux Watermolen.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thanks for having me on your agenda today. I'm going to try to share a screen, but right now it says the host disabled participant screen sharing. So whoever is the host, can you allow me to share, please?
Yeah, that'll be Rachel. She just stepped out for a minute. Let's.
Well, that's fine. When she comes back, we'll get her to enable me to share. And in the meantime, I'll just get going so we don't waste time. So as the introduction said, I'm Dreux Watermolen, and I am the chief of the analysis services section at the DNR. I'm a program manager, and in sort of my suite of things is the social science team and our social science research and consultation work, as well as our economics analysis, our cultural and archaeological resources program, our Wisconsin Environmental Policy Act compliance, which has a strong component of public involvement. So I've been with the department for about 35 years now, a little over 35 years in a couple of different roles. And throughout that time, I've been involved and work with various lake management organizations and property friends groups and others who do work similar to what you folks are involved with. And so what I'm hoping to do today is to share a little bit about some lessons that I've learned along the way, and to be able to talk a bit about some approaches that you might consider using to engage with your stakeholders. So if I were able to share my screen.
Drew, you should be good to go.
Oh, okay, let me see if I can do that. This is looking promising. If you would. Oh. Are you all seeing my slides?
Yes, we are.
Okay, terrific. So, you know, after kind of 35 years of working on natural resources management, and I've worked in sort of the water world early in my career. I worked in state parks. I worked, I do a fair amount of work with our fisheries program, our water quality folks, our wildlife management program. I've worked with our air program and on issues like climate change and sort of the broad range of natural resources and environmental protection things that my agency deals with. And I always like to start a talk about engaging stakeholders with the most important lesson that I've learned in all of that background. And it's really easy to sum up. People cause problems. It doesn't matter, again, what part of the natural resources world we're talking about. All of the tough challenges that we deal with are really people problems. They are the results of the cumulative impacts of individual actions. They're the results of sometimes uninformed decision-making and by uninformed, I mean not knowing what the consequences of decisions might be. Sometimes they're the results of people going about their lives without knowing that they're contributing to a problem. And so when we think about, all of the big sort of environmental issues that we deal with, it really comes down to people. Now, that said, the other thing I've learned, which is just as important, is that people can solve problems. And in fact, people are the only ones who ever have solved problems. And so when we talk about managing our natural resources, and this is particularly relevant to lake management, we have a suite of tools that people can apply, and they work. And the problems we run into in managing our resources is that we sometimes don't know how to bring these kinds of solutions to bear on problems. And that's because people can be very difficult to understand. And as social scientists, the folks I work with, they try to get at these kinds of things, these human dimensions, we call them. These are the values, the beliefs, what people tell us they intend to do, and then what they actually do, their behaviors. And when we can understand those, when we can understand these human dimensions, we can get to these kinds of solutions, right? We can figure out what regulations might work. We can figure out if regulations are the right answer. Maybe voluntary actions or incentives are necessary. Sometimes it's technical assistance. People want to do the right thing, but they don't know how. Sometimes it's financial assistance. Again, people want to do the right thing, but they just don't have the means to do it, and so on. So when we begin to understand these values, beliefs, attitudes, etc., we get these insights that help us pick the right suite of tools. And this is why stakeholder engagement becomes important. Now, it's one thing to sort of ask, what does my community value? But the answer to that question may or may not be helpful to us, because we can say our community values clean water, but if everybody is out on their lakefront eliminating natural shorelines and fertilizing their grass right up to the shore, right up to the high water mark, well, they might value clean water, but their behavior isn't enabling that clean water to be realized. And so it's really the interactions between these different human dimensions aspects that become important. And it's particularly the drivers or the influences, and what we seek to find out, and what I think you as a lake management organization want to know about your stakeholders is, what are their beliefs? What are their behaviors? But more importantly, what feeds those beliefs? What drives those behaviors? And how do we alter those? Because when we're able to do that, we can align attitudes and intentions with values. And as a result, we can align behaviors with the values. So if people tell us they value clean water and they believe that their behavior has an effect on the water and they want to make a difference, they have a positive attitude about change, then they might tell us they intend to no longer fertilize right up to the lakeshore. And then with enough education and enough examples of other people around the lake not doing that, we might see a shift in behavior. So it's these kinds of interactions and these kinds of influences that we look to understand. And there's a broad range of sort of engagement tools that folks can apply in their lake management settings. And we'll talk about a couple of examples of some of the approaches you might use. These approaches are really rooted in social science, and social science, like other science, attempts to answer questions. And so as you're going about thinking about a lake management plan, and you're thinking about the activities that your association might do or your lake district might undertake, there's questions you'll want to answer. And these are just some examples. I mean, you'll have your own set of questions. I don't want to be presumptuous and tell you this is the list, but you're going to want to know, how do people use the lake? What do they value about the lake? Are they primarily anglers or boaters? Are they primarily folks who like scenic value or scenic views? Are they folks that want peace and solitude on the lake? What kinds of things do they do? Do they stroll along the lake shore, or do they have their family over to have a campfire next to the lake, or are they taking their grandkids out on a pontoon boat for a ride and to swim? So how are they engaging with that resource? When you start thinking about problems on your lake, if polluted runoff is a concern, then we might talk about conservation actions, best management practices, and we'll want to know how feasible those are, because we wouldn't want to write a lake management plan that says, here's all the fixes for our lake, if in fact the people who live around the lake or the people who use the lake don't have the capacity to implement those best management practices, or don't have the interest in it. They're not convinced they work for some reason. So you want to know how feasible they are. You may, as an organization, have a list of issues that you think are affecting your lake. And we might find that your stakeholders have different perceptions. So it is not uncommon in a lake that's impacted by polluted runoff, by non-point source pollution, for people around the lake to believe that the source of the problem is the farmers upstream. They will tell us the runoff from the farm fields is coming into the river's coming into our lake. That's why we have a problem here. But your lake association might think, well, it's actually the people living around the lake who have failing septic systems. And so if you're going to develop a management plan and a strategy to address that polluted runoff, that phosphorus inputs to your lake, you'll want to know what your community thinks are the causes of the problem, because you're going to come up with solutions to address the problems. And it's important to understand, kind of where people are at. And then, will they engage in those solutions? And a part of that is, understanding local traditions and cultures. So maybe septic systems are a problem on your lake, but it is the local tradition, because we don't like the county coming and inspecting our septic system, that we only do that once every 5 years or once every 10 years if we can get away with it, because that's just the way we've always done it. And this is where that social norms comes in that I mentioned earlier, where you want to know what's going on in your watershed and how neighbors influence neighbors. So if you suddenly have a couple of neighbors who are having their septic systems checked every couple years and maybe pumped on a regular schedule, that might influence others in the neighborhood, sort of the keeping up with the Joneses phenomena. So understanding what those local traditions are and understanding the local culture can really help with affecting behaviors. We also want to think about what impact does using the lake have on people. Is the lake in a state where folks who work long weeks and are really looking for a getaway, are they able to go out on the lake and have that getaway? And does that make for a stronger community? Or are they out there on the lake and running into conflicts with other folks? So, grandma and grandpa taking the kids out on the paddle boat to swim, are they running into issues with jet skis or other types of watercrafts out there? Are the places they want to go swim invaded with Eurasian water milfoil? And does that impact their enjoyment? So kind of understanding not only the problems on the lake, but the root causes of the problem, and then the impact that those problems are having on the lake users become important for developing sort of this plan. So as you think about stakeholder engagement, you want to begin with these kinds of questions. And again, I'm not going to be prescriptive here and say these are the questions, but if you want to engage people, you have to have some basic information on which to work and on which to talk with folks about. And really, when we talk about stakeholder engagement, that's really what this is all about. It's talking with folks. And there's different ways we do that. So I just want to kind of summarize this introduction here by saying that, conservation problems, they are really social and economic problems. And yet my colleagues who are biologists and physical scientists, they're the ones who were always asking to help solve these problems. And so a big part of what I've been doing over the last 35 years and what my colleagues have been doing, what my team does, is we work with those natural scientists to figure out how to bring in this social and economic impact elements of decisions, and to factor that into how our management plans get developed. It's easy for us to say, hey, phosphorus is a problem in this lake. The solution is to reduce the phosphorus. But coming up with the tools to do that really requires understanding people and what people's beliefs are and what they're willing to do. So that's where we're going to go here is what are your options for engagement or for gathering input? And there's kind of two categories of input gathering. One is qualitative, and all of you, I'm sure, are familiar with sort of the traditional ways that government agencies and organizations strive to get input from their stakeholders. And, the public comment period, you have a draft plan, you put the plan out on your website, you tell people, hey, between now and February 15th, we want to hear your comments on this plan. And you have a comment period. Maybe you put something in your newsletter. You might even have a public meeting, or if you're a government agency, a hearing. You might call it a hearing, and you give people the opportunity to come and maybe hear a presentation about what's in the plan. And then at a public meeting, maybe it's answering questions and more of an educational opportunity, or maybe it's a public hearing and it's an opportunity for input. And so you give everybody 5 minutes to stand up and give their comments. Often these run in conjunction, of course, with the comment periods. Those are traditional qualitative ways of getting input. Okay, so when people come to the public meeting, they tell you what they think. And you, as a decision maker or as a planner, you don't really know how broad spread those opinions are. You don't know if I come and I say, hey, the problem is the runoff from the construction sites and all the new construction that's going on the west side of the lake. You don't really know how many people think that's the case. And so you may or may not choose to do something with that piece of information and you know, with that opinion. And that's okay, because that is how, you know, our government, our system has worked for a couple hundred years. And we often make decisions with qualitative information, not knowing how representative it is. But, you know, if we wanted to know more, you as a lake association, you might choose another tool, and that would be the interview tool. So you might actually go out and stand at the boat launch and intercept some folks and ask them what their individual understanding is, what their experience has been, what their perceptions or feelings or concerns are. And you might, you know, use this as an opportunity to gather more detailed information. So at a public meeting, somebody might get 3 or 5 minutes to share some thoughts with you. But if you actually sit down with them for an interview for 20 minutes or a half hour, you get more in-depth information. And that more in-depth information might clue you in to other topics. So in talking, it might be, well, the reason they think the construction site erosion is a problem is because they're seeing it run down the sewers. And so, geez, our storm sewers empty right to our lake. Maybe that's a direct input. And so now we can start talking about, should we reroute the storm sewer? Should it go to a detention pond before it goes into the lake? Or should we put mesh over our sewer grates so that it intercepts the runoff? Or should we be enforcing an erosion control ordinance? We start to get at what the problem is, and we can start to come up with different kinds of solutions. So using this interview approach is a way of further understanding what those public comments might be. Now, there are other types of qualitative research methods that can be applied, and they all really are sophisticated twists on this interview concept. So one thing that a lake association might do is they might develop some case studies where they collect in-depth information on some specific instances. So it might be, we know that runoff is a problem in our watershed because we have a high phosphorus and high nitrogen load in our lake. So we've heard in public comments that construction site erosion is a problem. So we might go out and we might actually look at a construction site and see, are they problems? And if they are, we might take photographs of them. We might measure the amount of soil washing off of the site. We might develop a map to show the water course, how the dirt moves from the construction site to the lake. We might develop a case study for farmland where we say, okay, nitrogen probably isn't coming from construction sites, but it could be coming from farmland. And so we might look at an example of where we have erosion coming off of a farm field. And again, you want to get in depth and detailed on a specific instance. And so case studies do that for us. Oral histories are another way of systematically collecting people's testimony in their own words about their own experiences. So you might do this to better understand what those individual experiences are. You might do that to find out about perspectives and feelings. And you want to, you might do that for people with long-term connections to the watershed or to the lake. So again, qualitative information helping you get the sense of what are the nuances of these problems, not only the problems, but the causes of the problems, what people see as solutions to the problems. And then you might go back and you might come up with some strategies. You might have some things that you're thinking about putting into your plan. And focus groups can be a really useful tool for gathering input, for looking sort of to get a sense of what a larger group of people might think. So typically focus groups involve pulling together 8 or 10 people. They're typically people that have things in common. Sometimes I hear folks say, well, we want to get a range of opinions, a range of, so we want to talk to farmers and we want to have some conservationists, some bird watchers. So we want to have some anglers and we want to have, and I say, well, then you want to do a bunch of focus groups, because a focus group, if you want it to be homogeneous. So you can say, let me get a group of farmers together and we'll have a conversation about these specific options. Let's get a group of anglers together and we'll have a conversation about these different proposals. Let's get a group of watershed residents who are not lakefront property owners, but are 2 or 3 tiers removed from the lake. And let's talk to them about these specific ideas. And so we use these focus groups to really get the more nuanced understanding and to give people an opportunity to talk with each other and to be contributing ideas that then can be used in your management planning and in developing other tools. So these are all qualitative approaches. If we did this, you would not answer the question, what % of watershed residents support an idea or don't support an idea? Or what % of watershed residents believe a particular thing to be true? They give you a sense, though, again, of the in-depth nuances behind beliefs. So then there are some quantitative approaches. This is the second sort of range of social science techniques that can be applied for engaging stakeholders and learning what they know. And this is a great way. These kinds of quantitative things are great ways of sort of measuring stuff. That's why they're quantitative. So they could be observations. You could gather information through direct observations by watching what people do or watching what the results of their behavior are. So you could put somebody at a boat launch and you could tally the number of people who clean their boats when they bring them out of the water. So you would have an idea of how big of a threat boat traffic is for the spread of invasive species. You could make observations of people's shoreline management. You could ride around the shoreline in a boat and you could mark down how many properties have lawns that come right up to the edge of the lake versus those that have some type of buffer strip. So you can make observations, you can collect that and have quantitative information. You can also conduct surveys. And this is one of those tools that many people want to use, okay? And so one of the questions on the agenda that Don and I worked on, it said, how can surveys help us understand the opinions, knowledge, and behaviors of stakeholders? And so I want to spend a minute talking about surveys because surveys are sort of a go-to tool. But before I get into the surveys and sort of survey methodology stuff, I want to just say that whatever tool or tools an organization picks, they should have a very clear idea of what they want to get out of their engagement with their stakeholders. Okay, so all of these approaches, the qualitative and the quantitative, are going to generate information. And then you want to do something with that information. And so I think it's important up front to know what your objective is and how you will use the information. And I'll give you some examples of this as I get a little bit further into the survey discussion. But this is really a key point that if you go away with nothing else, remember that people cause problems, people can solve problems. And if you're going to ask people to help you solve problems, if you're going to ask them for their opinions, their beliefs, their behaviors, etc., you need to know what you're going to do with the information that you get. Okay, that's the key takeaways. So surveys. I'm going to start with what is a survey. And a survey is simply, it's collecting data using a standard list of questions, right? And there are some features to this that are important. And we use these survey, and there are different kinds of surveys, but it doesn't matter the type. What we're really trying to do is to find information from a representative sample of stakeholders. Okay, so in your watershed, it's probably unlikely that your organization can talk to every single person. You're going to get, 20 or 30 people who show up at a public meeting on a Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock. And maybe if you have a really complicated situation or you're proposing something very controversial, you might get 70 or 80 people. But that's still going to be a relatively small representation of all of the people who live in your lake's watershed. So a survey can help you gather information from a subset of folks and know that it is representative of the broader public. Okay, that's really what we want to do with a survey. So in order to do that, you have to have a couple of things. One is a clearly defined population. So when you're thinking about the information that you want to gather and what you're going to do with it, it's important for you to think about who do I need to have that information from? So is it just the riparian landowners that I want to hear from? Is it everybody who is a taxpayer in the Lake District? Is it only those people who are angling or only those people who are boating? So you want to define, what is that population? And then we want to figure out how do we get a random sample of that population. And so by random sample, what I mean is that anyone who is in that population has an opportunity to be picked to give you the answers to your questions. So they have an equal probability. And this will allow us to then determine our error margins or confidence intervals that are associated with our results. So there's two things we want to make sure of when we're doing survey research, okay? When we're asking our stakeholders to provide information. Number one is we want to make sure that the information is reliable. So if we ask a question, we want to make sure that the information we get answers the question, okay? And I'll give you a couple of examples of that here in a minute. And the other thing we want to do is we want to make sure that it's a valid representation. So if somebody tells us something, we want to know how likely what they told us is going to be in common with everybody else in that population. So if I talk to 10 people out of 100, I might have some confidence that those 10 people probably represent the views of all 100. But if I sample 25 of those 100, my confidence might go up. So if I pick those 25 randomly, my confidence is going to be even greater that what they're telling me is a valid representation. So these are the key sort of experimental design features of doing surveys. And one thing I find is that folks who want to do surveys are not always thinking about who their population is or how they're going to draw this sample. So I'm going to suggest some ways you can do that. But first, I want to point out that there are a variety of ways of doing surveys, and these principles, these concepts of a clearly defined population and a random sample, they are applicable to all of these different methods. So if I'm doing a telephone survey of watershed residents, or I'm doing handing out surveys at boat launch to boat users, I want to know what those populations are, and I want to know how likely it is that my sample is random. So today we have this great thing called the internet that allows us to reach a lot of people, and we can now reach a lot of people not just through the internet proper, but sort of the web of tools that are, you know, smart tools. So phones, iPads, all of these other devices that folks can access the internet through. And so there are often folks who say to me, well, we want to do a survey, but we want to do it as an email survey because we don't have the money to do a mail survey. So we just want to program it in SurveyMonkey and send it out, you know, or put it on the web and let people access it. And so that is an approach to getting input and engaging stakeholders, but it is not really a survey. So I want to just take a minute to talk about why that isn't. So often what we put up on the web that we call a survey is really just a questionnaire. It is the tool that we're using to collect input. But that input, if we don't know the population it's coming from, and we don't know how representative the respondents are of the overall population, it really isn't a survey, because again, that survey is this quantitative investigation of a population. So when folks tell me they want to do these online surveys, they generally lack the ability to define the population of interest ahead of time. Okay, a lake association placing a survey form, a questionnaire, or an input form on their website doesn't really have a way of identifying a population to respond to that input form. So I could be living 500 miles away from your watershed, and I stumble across your input form. I could answer all those questions, and I might actually not know anything about your watershed. Or maybe I visited your watershed once 30 years ago when I was traveling through Wisconsin, and I think I remember what that lake was like. And you don't, as a association, know well, geez, did that response really come from somebody in the watershed? And you might say, well, we can look at where their IP address was. And if their IP address wasn't in the watershed, we can just throw those results out. But you know what? I'm a member of your association and I didn't get to do the input form. I didn't get to fill it in before I left on vacation. But now here I am in Florida and it's a really rainy day and I can't go out and do the things I wanted. So I'm stuck in my hotel room and I'm using the business center at the hotel to respond to your survey. So my IP address is thousands of miles away and you threw my input out because of that. So these are things that we want to avoid. The other thing that happens is respondents are self-selected. They're not randomly picked. And so again, we don't know how representative they are. So these are some common flaws with using sort of the online method for engaging with stakeholders. Now, I'm not saying that because these flaws, because of these flaws, you shouldn't do online input forms. It's fine to do an online input form as long as you recognize what the limitations of the information are. And again, this goes back to my point of you want to know what questions you want answered and why you want them answered. And if you have a sense that it's important to have some precision to your confidence in the answer, then you want a survey approach. If you just want to get a finger in the wind and know sort of what do people seem to think, well, then an online form with these methodological limitations is an okay thing. It's not any different really than holding a public meeting and the self-selected people show up and you don't really know how representative their input is because they weren't selected randomly. So these survey requirements are important. So let me give you a couple of other examples. I say questions matter. Again, you want to know why you're asking things. So as a lake association, you might be asking folks, what lake issues are you concerned about? And you might get an answer like this. Now, what does this tell you? Boats on the lake. Are there too many? Are they moving too fast? Are they capsized vessels that are causing a navigation problem? Hard to tell. Could it be something else? Okay, so again, why do we want to know what issues are you concerned about? And what are we going to do with that information? So we have to think about how we ask these questions. So let's be a little more specific. What concerns do you have about Anchor Lake? Well, I'm concerned about water quality. Again, what does this tell us? Is it because the water is, I can't see the bottom of the lake? Is it because the water is green or brown? It looks like chocolate milk. Is it because, geez, I go out on the lake and it stinks? Is it because I know there's a lot of fertilizer running off into the lake? Or is it because that fertilizer is causing algae? We really want to think about what do we need to know to manage our lake and how can we best get people to tell us that? So these general kinds of questions I'm just going to put forward on a survey are not helpful because we get responses like this. Now, this is where the qualitative work could come in. If you had a focus group with people who live in your watershed, you got 10 people there, and you ask them what are their concerns. And if they told you water quality, then you could ask them, well, what do you mean by water quality? And they would tell you what they mean by that. And you could get a better understanding, and then you could use that information to structure a survey question that is more instructive for you. So you could say, how concerned are you about water clarity in Anchor Lake? And have a response options that say, I'm very concerned, I'm somewhat concerned, I'm not at all concerned, etc. Or you could ask, in your experience on Anchor Lake, have you have smells or odors affected your enjoyment? And you could get a sense of how widespread odor problems are. Okay, so just a couple of different ways of going about that. But again, thinking about what are you going to do with that information. So sometimes we ask questions like, what actions will you take? And in this case, I was saying about water consumption, and we might provide a bunch of answers. I think a little bit better approach here. Again, because you say, what actions will you take? Well, you're going to maybe get a laundry list of things. And then what do you do with that laundry list? How do you make sense of it? So the way the social scientists would do it is they would go through an exercise of coding the responses, and then they would try to quantify how many of each kind of response there were. But another way would be to simply ask, which of these things would you do? And ask folks to check the boxes. So we can, again, think about if we're going to develop a management plan, what are the range of things we could put in the management plan? And then we can ask people about that range of things. Just another example here about thinking about what you're going to do with the information. So here's a, how would you rate the fishing? And some options. And if somebody tells me it's poor, what do I do with that? Is it that there's not enough fish for me to catch? Is it that I want walleye, but this lake is full of bass? Is it that I like to go fishing in the bay, and every time I go there, there's a whole bunch of other anglers? So again, knowing what you can do in your lake should drive how you ask these questions. So maybe you want to ask, are there enough, if you fish in the lake, do you think there are too few fish, just enough fish, too many fish? And maybe you want to say not too few fish, but too few walleye, too few bass. You can tailor it how you want, but these are ways of trying to sort out what do those stakeholders want. This was just another example. Do you visit your town beach, or do you visit a regional county beach? If there's somebody said yes, I wouldn't know, did they visit the town beach, or did they visit the county beach, or do they visit both beaches? Now, it might not matter, but if it does matter, I'm going to ask this question a different way. Do you visit the town beach? And maybe the answer to this is, 80% of people don't visit the town beach. So I know that in my management plan, if one of my goals is to connect people to the lake, then I have to figure out why aren't they visiting the beach? Or if they're visiting one beach versus the other, that might tell me I need to think about how is one beach different than the other. Another way to ask it is you can combine those into a single question. Where do you visit the beach? And then people can tell us, and we know if they do both. All right, so those are a whole bunch of different examples of ways of asking folks for input, a different suite of tools or a range of tools to use depending on what your management objectives are. And so how can DNR help you with the stakeholder engagement stuff? Well, the first way is my team can talk with you about what are the right tools given the questions you have. Okay, so if you want quantitative information and you're going to do a survey, well, then we can help review your survey questions and offer suggestions like the examples I was just giving. And we can talk with you about ways of getting the best response from your effort, whether it's a mail survey, whether it's an internet survey, telephone survey, what have you. We can talk through with you what are some best practices and then review the questions. So that's something we do for a lot of lake associations, a lot of lake districts, especially those that receive funding from DNR, because if you receive funding from DNR and it's going to pay for a stakeholder engagement effort, then we require a review by my team before we reimburse for that work. So we work with a lot of associations and their consultants all through the year on these kinds of things. The other thing, since I mentioned it, we do have the surface water grants programs, and I put the link to the page where you can find the information on those grants. For most of our grant opportunities, our surface water grants, we will cover the cost for stakeholder engagement if that is outlined in the grant application and the proposal. And as I said, if we do fund that, then it is required to come through my shop for review. So I've been talking for a long time here, and I wanted to make this interactive, and I think I failed on that part because I got carried away here with the Zoom thing. But if folks have questions, I'm happy to try to answer them, and I'll stop sharing so that we can see back on the screen.
Drew, can you share your PowerPoint with us so we can fill the gaps in our notes?
Certainly.
Drew, I've got a question. If we were to send out, say, a newsletter to all of the property owners within our water, not our watershed, but within the lakes here, with a survey in it, and you got responses back from that, would that be representative? I guess I was thrown by a random sample. How do you determine who those random people are? And if only 50% of them respond, I mean.
So there's a couple of ways for me to answer that. So let me try to be brief. If your entire population that you want to get information from is the folks who receive that newsletter, then sending out the information to those people and sending it to all of them, and then you got a 50% response rate, that would be phenomenal. And that you could have a high likelihood of believing that that level of response is representative of that population. Statistically, that would work out. And so you may not have randomly selected the subset of that population, but your population is small enough that that response rate would likely represent a random response.
Drew, this is a question. If a survey is statistically accurate and created accurately, what is the response rate that you would consider accurate? My past experiences are 10%, 15%.
It really depends on the size of the population. But in surveys that the DNR conducts, and we do a lot of them. I just, in fact, before this meeting, I had a check-in with my staff, and we have 7 surveys that are in the field right now. We have a survey of waterfowl hunters. We have a survey of lake sturgeon spear fishermen. We have a survey of campers who camped in our state parks this last summer, and so on. We have these different surveys out there, and our response rates right now, and we're still in the midst of data collection, but our response rates are between 28 and 68% across those surveys. And by the time we're done, I'm gonna guess we're gonna have a minimum of a 50% response rate on each of those surveys. Now, those for social science research, those are really high response rates, okay? Oftentimes what we see in the professional literature is response rates in the 28 to 35%, and that can be statistically valid. You know, again, it depends on the size of the population you're sampling, and you know, we can help you figure that out, how representative it is, because what we're able to do with those numbers is we're able to calculate that confidence interval, and that tells you how reliable those results will be. So again, you could have a survey that has a 25% response rate, and you could say, you know, that's 90% confident in what that these are represented. But if you had a 35% response rate, maybe you would have a 94% confidence rate, right? And if you had a 90% response rate, well, you might have a 98% confidence, okay? So the greater that response rate is, the greater your confidence that that's going to be representative of the population. Did that answer your question adequately?
Yes, yes.
Hey, Drew?
Yeah.
Hi, Scott Bordeaux. Can you just shed a little bit of your experience on the different types of surveys and demographics that you see with each type?
Yeah, that's a good question. So recently, my team has been doing a lot of what we call mixed mode surveys. So we might do a traditional mail survey to households, and you know, we randomly select addresses and then mail a survey to the residents. And we couple that with what's called an internet panel. And what we do is there are survey research firms that hire people to take surveys. And they know the demographics of the people that they are paying to take surveys. And we will purchase a sample, and they will provide us with the email contacts for a panel. And we will tell them, you know, we want a panel of 900, we want 900 responses that represent the census demographics of people in this geographic area. And they will provide us with email for 1,800 people, and we will administer the survey. And when we get to the 900 responses, it gets cut off, because we know that 900 responses is going to be representative of the geography that we're looking at. And we will double check that against the census demographics. And if need be, then we can weight results so that they accurately reflect. So what happens is, in our traditional mail surveys, they tend to be, the respondents tend to be a little bit older. They tend to be a little bit more male, and they tend to be a little bit more rural. Our online panels tend to be more female, younger, and urban. And when I say that, again, we know what those demographics are because of how we're getting that sample. And so then we can weight that to reflect the census demographics of the appropriate geography. So yes, the method you use can affect that. You know, telephone surveys, they tend to be older. They tend to be more rural. And that's because that's the demographic that still has a landline. And when we do telephone surveys, it's often random digit dialing, which is for landlines. As telemarketers have figured out, there are ways to get to cell phones, but we generally, if we're doing a telephone survey, we work with the University of Wisconsin's Survey Center, and it's typically a residential survey that we're doing, you know, a resident survey, and so that's where landlines are still available. So it varies by method, but we can correct it for any one of those methods. We can correct to make sure we have the correct demographics.
Thanks.
You know, and again, the method you pick, it should be driven by what is the population you want information from, you know, who are the people you want to hear from, and then what's going to be the best way to get that information relative to the questions you're asking. So some questions, asking them over the telephone is quick and easy. Other questions, it might be better to do it by mail. So if you remember, I had a question here that had a whole bunch of response options. Those might be difficult to talk through in a telephone setting. They might lend themselves better to an email survey or a traditional mail survey. If your questions are simple yes/no questions, or strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree, you might be able to get those by telephone. But you whatever choices you make, they should be driven by what population you want to sample and what you want to ask them.
Drew, I have a question. So do you have a standard list of questions that we as a group could use in order to make our survey?
We don't really have a standard list. I mean, I can share examples of surveys that have been done by other lake organizations. What we typically recommend, Karen, is that you as a group or your consultant, or maybe you have a subcommittee, you do a brainstorming exercise and you say, what are all the things we want to know? And you just do a brain dump, right? And get the list. And then you go back and you ask the question, why do we want to know this? Okay. And if you can't answer that question, you take it off the list. All right. So as an example, you might say, I want to know how many people go to the beach. Well, why do you want to know that? Is it because you want to plan some educational events and you want to talk to people? So you want to know how many educators you're going to need to put out there on the beach to reach everybody? Is it because you want to know how many people are at risk of being exposed to blue-green algae, so that you know how big of a concern that is on the lake? Is it, you know, you go down the list like this, you ask the questions, and maybe you say, you know what, we're not going to do anything to address that problem, so why ask about it? So for another example, you could be like, we can ask about fishing, but you know what, the DNR is not going to stock this lake because they've already said it doesn't have the right habitat for walleye. It's a warm water lake. So why ask people if they want more walleye in the lake? Like you're not gonna be able to do anything with that because you're not gonna get more walleye in the lake. So anyway, but you might think, oh, it'd be nice to know like how many people want more walleye. And then you say, well, but I really can't do anything with that. Okay, so we recommend sort of going through that process, get all the ideas out, and then sort of argue amongst yourselves about what do we have control over, what can we do something about, how can we use the information? And if the answer is, well, it would just be nice to know, then you shouldn't ask for it. And here's why. People want, if they're going to give you input, they're going to respond to a survey, they're going to participate in a focus group. There's two things at play. Number one, they want to know that what you're going to do with the information you get. And if your answer is just, it's nice to know, they're not going to take the time to be nice to knowing. Okay, they're just not going to do that. The other thing is what we call respondent burden. If you have that long list and your survey questionnaire ends up being 20 pages long and it takes 45 minutes to fill out, your response rate's going to go down dramatically. Okay, instead of being in the 15 to 20% or the 50% range, it's going to be in the 2 or 3% range. So you want to make it as easy as possible for people to give you the information you're seeking. And the best way to do that is to be very clear about why you're asking questions and only ask those questions that matter. So if it's just nice to know, get rid of it. And this is why I don't like to have a list, a standard list, because the issues on your lake are different than the issue on somebody's lake up in Oneida County or down in Walworth County. You know, some places have, I give you a list of questions and you ask about septic systems, and your lake maybe doesn't have any septic systems on it because everybody's on public sewer. Like, I've wasted your time even reviewing those questions. So it's better for you. And then what the way I like to work is you have that list of questions that you want, and then we can look at that and we can say, okay, here's how another lake association asked for that information. If you asked it this way, would it give you what you need? Okay. So yeah, I can share examples of what other people did, but I'd prefer not until you're at the point of where you know what you want to ask about.
Thank you.
Sure thing. Our goal is to be helpful and not clutter clutter everybody's thinking with extraneous stuff. So we want you to be in the driver's seat and us to be helpful.
Yes, did you have a question?
I'll pass for right now.
Oh, okay. Anyone else? Question, thank you.
Just so I'm aware, David's question was, we're gonna get this PowerPoint, correct?
Yes.
And then do we have his email address? If we think of a question about a survey that we could ask him?
Yeah, that's okay with you, Drew?
Yeah, my email address is included in the PowerPoint slides, and you can feel free to email me. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really been interesting, Drew. And one of the things that I just wanted to mention and kind of build on a question that Barb asked, we have applied for an education grant through the DNR. So we hope to get approval on it early this year. And one of the things we want to do is outreach. And one of the items within that would be a formal newsletter. We do a newsletter currently that's more informal. It's not necessarily on a strict timeline. We've never done a mailer. And so one of the things that we hope to do is to mail it to all members of the Lake Association. And so when you mentioned that if there's a grant to do that, that automatically we then work with your group, your shop, to approve it. So that's one possibility. The other possibility that's out there is we have a current surface water grant for water testing. And we have the 9 key element plan that brings up all kinds of possibilities. So I think we'll be working together. We're really hopeful that we get approval on that education grant, because that kind of puts us in the position of getting out there. So I think you'll hear from us.
Yeah, well, I'll look forward to it. I'm always appreciative of folks working locally to steward and manage the resources that are in their own backyards. And as I said at the beginning, people are what solve problems. So thank you for your work. And I, again, am here to be helpful when we can.
Thank you very much, Drew. It's been very helpful. Appreciate it. Thanks. So next item on the agenda, I've asked Barb if she could talk a little bit. There was a recommendation made when we were at the Winter Farmers Market a week or two ago. And anyhow, the recommendation was that maybe we should consider that tree sale that used to be done through the Lake Association of Lake Camelot. I'm not sure if the other groups did it. So I asked Barb what she knew about it. So anyhow, we put it on the agenda. So Barb, what do you know?
Okay, well, I went to the source. Gene Osgood had always been the coordinator for Lake Camelot when they did it, and tried to understand all of the ins and outs of what it would require as far as manpower, getting the orders and things like that. But basically, Land and Water has a tree and shrub sale every year. They offer it in bundles of 25, and oftentimes that scares people off from ordering it because it's too much for what they can do in their own yard. So the thought would be that we would take orders directly from property owners, and they could order one item of something or 10 of something or whatever. We could group it all together and then place one order with Land and Water to get the items, and then we'd have to coordinate, possibly with Tri-Lakes to have to pick up the trees when they come in April and take them to have a place for people to come in and pick them up on that particular date and get them out. We would probably have some additional ones left over that we could either use as giveaways at State of the Lakes or try to sell to other people that didn't send their orders in by our deadline that we imposed or whatever. Or we could just give them away at the farmer's market food, something like that. So I thought, that it would be a good way for us to engage further with people here, provide a service for them, and do something good for the lake shores too, for healthy lakes. So I guess I'm willing to kind of coordinate that if you think it's a good idea.
It's a great idea.
Everybody in favor?
The one thing I add is I ordered from Land and Water 3 or 4 years now. The trees generally arrive in mid-April, and you need to get them in the ground pretty quick.
Yeah.
So the window is narrow.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we'll have to keep that in mind.
Yes. So Anna, are you on still?
I am, Barb. Yep.
You get involved with it. Is there like a particular date at all that Land and Water needs to have an order from us?
If you give me a second here, usually what we do is orders stay open until we're pretty much sold out. So we had people ordering, we had leftover trees that we had already ordered that people are even buying the day of pickup. But what I would do is I would reach out to Megan Steckelberg in our office. She coordinates all of the tree sale, and she's kind of in charge of it for Land and Water. I would definitely reach out to her and just talk it over with her about putting in a large order and how she feels or how she thinks about that.
Okay, maybe.
I don't.
The timing on it might be off too, because by the time we got information out to people and expected them to get orders in, we're probably looking at the end of January was the earliest. Is that going to be too late to place an order with Land and Water?
In January?
Yeah.
No, that's not too late. That's not late at all. It's honestly a first come, first served basis. I don't want to tell you it's too late because we could have a bunch of orders in December, or it's just first come, first served basis. So what I would do is I would reach out to Megan ASAP. I don't think an order by January should be an issue, but I would definitely get a hold of Megan.
Okay, will do.
And you can just call our general line for that. She's the one who answers all of the general phone. So.
So do you want me to proceed then?
I would say yes. I've heard positive from Karen.
Yeah, it's a
Jerry.
great idea. I've used them and they really turned out very well. And I'm guessing if there's a problem with time, as Phil had indicated, maybe we can plant them in an area to keep them viable until we decide that we wanted to give them away, because they're pretty hardy.
Okay, we'd be looking at more manpower there. Then I think the way that I'd like to approach it, and this is kind of what Camelot did in the past, is that they're given a specific date, usually the Saturday after whatever that date is, that we would be able to pick them up in April from Land and Water, and they have to be there. If they can't make it, they need to get a neighbor or somebody else to come and pick it up for them. But it's kind of a hard and fast thing. Otherwise, I mean, you could be waiting around for a month or two for some people to get around to doing it.
Well, what I was considering was the ones that are left over. That's all I was thinking about.
Okay.
So, if we wanted to give those away, that would be the way to keep them viable until we could give them away. But yeah, you're right. People have to pick them up immediately.
If I can ask a question about, do we prepay for all of these things?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so how much money are we talking about?
Well, the bundles come in 25, and they might vary in price from 15 up to say $31, $37. So I was thinking, what if we just offer everything at $2 for everything they order, no matter what it is? Make it simple. They would send their orders in to me, and then I could make up the one group order to send in. So in some cases, like if we charge $2 a piece and we get an order for 20 of them, we're going to get $40, but we might only have to pay $15 to Land and Water. So it could help us out a little bit too, but still, I mean, who's going to quibble about $2 for a tree?
Right. Yeah. I was curious about what our cash outlay would be, what we for upfront money in terms of what we have in our.
Well, as they place the order, they have to give
They
the
have
money
to pay for
too,
that.
so we would have the money up front.
Good. Thank you.
I have a question. What do we gain if we sponsor this? Would we be just as well served if we want people to purchase trees from Land and Water and plant them on their property to, for example, send a specific newsletter out to our group, just advertising the availability? I get an email because I participated. But if we just send that out and let them work directly with Land and Water, it might be as effective.
It could be, but I think the tripping point is that they have to order 25 if they deal directly with Land and Water. So if they're only looking for one.
Yeah, but they're like, they're $2 a piece.
Yeah.
I mean, well, no, probably $30 for 25, for like the Fraser fir. Okay. They're a foot to 18 inches tall. 25, you can plant them in a couple hours. You just, I can't imagine people wanting 3 balsams,
Well, at some point they're going to grow really fast. So
Well, they do grow, but it's not fast.
Okay.
Well, can I interject here? Because actually the first time I ordered, that almost prevented me from ordering. So when what Barb said actually applied to me, and I wasn't afraid I could put 15 bushes in my, I almost didn't order from them, and I didn't want to waste them because they're plants. So I totally understand what Barb is saying. I think that's also a way for people to look at us as a group that facilitates those kind of things, because that's exactly what we're trying to do. So for all those reasons, I don't know if it's going to be successful or not, but I think it would be worthwhile to at least try it.
Yeah, me too.
I don't want to be the
The
names.
girls are in.
Tell you that Sherwood did join with Camelot a couple of years ago, put this out in our newsletters, and participation was pretty disappointing. I think there were like 2 people on Sherwood that were interested. I don't know how many on Camelot, but
Well, I guess,
I expected more participation than we saw.
well, I guess we'd find out, you know, and it's worth one try. If it doesn't work, you know, we don't have to do it again in the future. But if it does work, you know, maybe it'll become more and more popular and people will look forward to it. Camelot hasn't done it for a while, but it, you know, there were a lot of trees that were ordered at that time when they did do it.
And it directly relates to what we're trying to do, because it's also bushes. So it's everything that we want to promote. I like it, Barb. I love the idea.
I might just suggest you double your money on the price. I know you were just wanting to keep it easy, but I would look at it as almost as a fundraiser as well.
Okay.
You're doing a lot of effort. You're helping them out. You're bringing the stuff here. You're doing a lot of things. I would consider, you know, doubling or whatever the price on each unit. Because you're providing a service.
Yeah.
And they don't have to buy the bundles. They have to go get them. They get them right here. You know, that's a lot. So you should, you know, try to get something for that. Be my thought.
I'm in favor of it too, Barb. I understand the potential issues with it, you know, as Dave pointed out, and I think I remember some of that discussion from back in my Lake Camelot board meetings. But I think the value here is one that Karen has pointed out, so I'm just kind of rephrasing what she said, and I think that there is reputational value. You know, we want people to see us as a helpful organization to our community, so it's just another thing that does that. So I'd be in favor of this. Give it a try for a year, as Dave suggested.
Okay, so what I'll do then is get in touch with Megan and make sure that I've got everything understood and then put something together. We can get it out like through the lake associations as well, you know, to their email list and everything. Okay.
Sounds great.
Great.
Thanks, Barb. Okay. Next item on the agenda is standing committees, and I know Karen's on vacation, so we tried not to put too much pressure on it. And we did. I've asked Bob Minkowski and Phil to report back to us on what the experience was at the winter farmers market. So Bob couldn't make it today. Phil is here, and also I had a discussion with Gus Mancuso, who's had further conversation with the administrators at Nakusa High School. And so he's got some thoughts to share. And so I thought what I would do, Karen, if I could just kind of, you know, turn the general topic over to you. Is that okay with you? And just let these other folks comment as needed. Does that work for you?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay, great. You're on, Karen.
So as you know, I'm not physically there today. So thank you so much for doing all the work, especially Phil and Bob for doing the farmers market. I'm hoping that's going well. So I hope is it going well, Phil? Did it work out?
It did go well. The attendance was far less than we get in a summer farmers market. A lot of the people that we saw there that we knew are full-time residents. So we aren't getting the weekenders, which is a big part of our target audience for the summer farmers market. But nevertheless, we had some lengthy conversations with some folks on the lakes. So I think it was beneficial in that regard. We had 2 signups for the newsletter, which is kind of light compared to the summer farmers market. But it's only once a month. I think it's well worth doing.
Good to know. And then I guess it looks like the plans for the summer farmers market I guess we'll have to work on that, but surely what we need to do and what I'm trying to get done in the meantime is work on some brochures and also maybe getting a big brochure holder and of course enhancing our table so that we can fit as much as we have to put on there and also scale back and find out exactly what we need to have on the table. So those are all extremely important for getting our farmers market set up. And then I have been corresponding a little bit with by email with Keith Johnson of the Nakusa High School, but I know Gus has evidently talked to him more. So I guess if Gus can let us know what's going on there, I'd really appreciate that.
Sure, thank you. It's really nothing more than what you already know already. I had to talk to Keith. I had the reason to talk to Keith about another issue, so I called him up and asked him what his interest was and how we could still connect. And he's still very interested in taking 2 teachers that Karen and I have met and talked with. One is an environmental science teacher that teaches elective junior and senior classes. And then also, which I think is even more intriguing, is the fact that he's got us, Karen and I, in touch with the civics teacher, and the civics class at the 9th grade level over at Nakusa is one in which they are very interested in coming up with and creating real life experience for students at the 9th grade level to become engaged in their community. And we think, Karen and I think, that this would be an excellent way. And I think it's just a matter of, which everybody understands here with COVID and schoolhouses trying to cope with all the other kinds of things that are happening externally as well. And so when Karen gets back, I think we can have an opportunity to ring the bell again with Keith and Karen. He said that he would be certainly willing to organize a meeting with the 2 teachers on their early release day, which is on Wednesdays at 2 o'clock. And then also any other time that you and I could be available. And then I think before that time, I think you and I would best serve to get together and really give them specifics as to what we could do to engage the students. And then of course, what Karen just mentioned about creating some kind of a brochure, to us, or at least to me, and I think Karen would agree that, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, that, one of the components is education. Getting kids aware of what's happening. And then the second piece is how do we get them engaged? And so finding out what turns them on to conservation and to careers like what we're talking about with Kyle is, I think, important. It's also my understanding, Karen, in talking to Keith, that there's a student that's interested in, and you're going to have to help me out, Kyle, with a Jennifer Bergman and she's with Adams.
She's DNR Fisheries.
Or DNR Fisheries, and she did a meeting with a student from Nakusa and a student from Adams Friendship around career explorations. So I think that could be something that we could gain some traction on in the future. And then of course, with Phil's work on the outreach about the interns, I think there could be a sweet spot there to get kids motivated about what we're talking about. And it's not just water quality, but it's conservation, and it's about our land and nature, et cetera. So I think that could help us down the line. So that's about it right now. Karen, did you have anything to add or add to questions?
No, and thank you for a great, synopsis of what's going on. Thank you so much. Actually, I told Keith when I was going to return and when we can get together. Unfortunately, it's right at the holidays. So hopefully he'll be able to find some time, but I definitely want to get together and figure out what we can do, what direction we need to go. I think that Drew's presentation might help us decide what's important, you know, what direction we need to go in and what will work with the kids and all those things. So I'm really excited that we had the presentation today. So that should all work out. Yeah, I'm really excited about that. So then, and also maybe we might want to get Kyle involved. I mean, I don't know if he has time for it, but education is part of the 9 key element plan. So maybe he can be involved in that too.
Karen, Rachel here.
Yep.
Quick comment. These things may or may not overlap, but I'll let y'all be the judge. So I'm working with Mike Schoenfeld, which I'm sure is one of those teachers. He's probably
Yes.
like the environmental
Yes, he
science.
is, yep.
So
Yes, we had him.
we got exciting news that they just received a grant through the Sand County Foundation to redo some of their prairie areas in the school forest grounds. So
Wow.
yeah, so I'm actually heading out there tomorrow afternoon to go walk the grounds and kind of talk through some plans. Come springtime, we will be burning that space. And then we're hoping to kind of have like more of a community day where it's open for people to come learn about prairie restoration. So if that's something that the 14 Mile would be interested in being a part of, that might boost your Healthy Lakes plantings. And give people an opportunity to kind of see that work in action if that interests you.
Definitely. And then we can also then, you know, distribute any video we take of that to all the people that we have on our list. So that's a great opportunity. Thank you so much. That's outstanding. Please get in contact with me about that.
Yes, will do.
Maybe worth contacting. Karen, anything more?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you so much. I appreciate your being understanding.
Yeah, sure. I hope you're in a nice warm place.
I am.
Oh, great, and safe travels back home.
Thank you.
Next category is watershed research with Phil.
Yeah, well, the in-lake testing, of course, is complete for the year. We'll start up again in May. Upstream testing continues every month. We're heading into a period when I've not been out in the middle of winter and dealt with the ice, and I don't think Dave has either, but we'll figure it out and make it work. We also, with respect to the internship status, we did interview 7 youngsters, young adults, to try to recruit them in our water testing intern program. We made offers to 3 of them, and they all accepted, and they are now employees of Tri Lakes. And we held last Saturday, right? We held a training section for them over at the Tri Lakes office, and I'm very impressed with these young people. They're enthusiastic. Many of them have some experience. Two of them are from UWSP in water-related programs. One is a high school student from Adams Friendship, and I think they're all ready to get started. So we will get them all out sometime between Christmas and New Year's for our foray out into the wilderness in the winter and see how that goes.
Yeah, we're holding off just a little bit on our December survey so that we can get them involved during their holiday break. So
Yeah.
So we don't need to try to schedule on a weekend. So that should work out better for everybody. So we'll keep an eye on it. We've got a proposed date. Once we get the forecast a week ahead or whatever, we'll try to either lock it in or reschedule. So I just want to say that Phil obviously put a lot of time into the training session he put together. He made some great handouts, pulled all the information together. We're far better off as far as our procedures and protocols than we ever were previously in getting all that documented. So I'm really thankful for that.
Well done, boys. Thank you. Anything more, Phil?
No,
Nope. then-
Okay, say Dave, you're on. The ground rules forward and grant development.
We're kind of in the time of year where we're in the holding pattern. We've got grants put in for the surface water for healthy lakes. And, about the middle of March is when we should hear on those, so. Then we can jump into high gear then, and we're starting to work on things like our brochures and those kinds of things. That's when we want our release. Once those grants are awarded, I'm working into the assumption that they will be awarded because they were so well written. Then we'll really do a good job at that point of documenting our volunteer efforts and putting that together to get the matching shares for those grants. Other than that, I've got during the slow season here, I've got 3 healthy lakes reimbursement submissions, one for 2019, one for 2020, and probably 3 for 2021 once I get all the information. Right, Karen?
I'm working on it.
So that'll probably be right after the holidays. I'll get going on that, starting with the oldest one first because of the timelines. That's all I've got.
Okay, so Dave, just refresh my memory, is the award date for the education grant, is that like Feb 1st?
No, it's mid-March. It's like
Oh,
March
mid-March.
15th.
Oh, okay, all right, thanks.
Yep, all the surface water grants are all that same timeline.
Yeah, I have nothing to report on the Legacy Foundation grant, kind of the same status. I just have a lot of background work to do on it, but I hope to do it over the winter, maybe in Arizona.
Can you just get a little bit about the Walden Park?
Oh, all right, yeah, thanks for the reminder. So I get a call from Michelle, right? Anyway, she's with the Parks Commission, and Dave and I have been contacted, I would say a couple of months ago. And the Park and Rec Committee here in Rome were interested in creating like a landing site for kayaks on Walden. And if you're familiar with the area, it's right off of 9th, where 14 or Spring Branch Creek comes under and feeds into Walden, which feeds into Camelot. And there's a big park there. There's a baseball diamond and a fair amount of beach area, about 230 feet. And so their plan was to have a launch there for kayaks, so people could park there and put their kayaks in and go down Walden and probably down other areas of Camelot. So it was really a good idea. So Dave and I went and took a look at it because we thought maybe it was a good area or potential for healthy lakes. And it'd be a pretty big project for that. But anyway, I got a call, and Melissa Rhodes is her name. I said Michelle, that threw me off. But anyhow, Melissa called me a week or so ago, and she said that they have gotten a grant. Actually, they put in an external grant, and it's enough money in the grant so that they can put that launch in. And so she asked if Dave and I were still interested in talking further about expanding that whole park area. So that's something that'll happen in springtime. We'll start talking about it again. So that's exciting. That's a great piece of property, and I think would really lend itself towards improving that whole.
I think it could be a showcase, and plus there's a significant slope onto the waterfront. So it would improve the area, the water quality in the area by putting in some buffer.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Anything more, Dave? Okay, thanks. Barb, finance.
I don't have anything in particular, but I trust that Phil can fill us in on the treasurer's report question.
Oh, okay, very briefly, we have roughly $4,600 treasury. It hasn't changed much in the last few months. That's all I can say.
Okay. Thank you, Barb and Phil. So partnership development is my area. as mentioned earlier, I've arranged speakers for January and for March. We have created 3 award certificates, framed award certificates for actually 3. One individual, Joan Kramer, who lives up on the 14-mile, and she has provided access to us for testing for probably 3 or 4 years now. And so we felt like we wanted to recognize her kindness in giving us access. And so we created a 114-mile plaque award for her. And we also did for Owen Rock. Some of you were with us when we attended the Cranberry Tour, which was really an excellent tour. So we put together a plaque for them, an award. And also, many of you were with us at Heartland Farms earlier this summer when we did the tour of their facility. And so I'm still trying to connect with them. We're trying to find a date that works where I can actually hand it to them in person. It gets too close to January 1st, they'll be receiving it from mail. But I wanted to recognize them. I appreciate what they've done for us. 14-mile status. I think today's a good indication of good work that continues. So, thanks everybody. And let's keep it going. Next category is lake reports. Anything specific anyone has to share with us?
On Lake Sherwood, I'm busy preparing for the Lake Sherwood Fishery, and that is always held the free fishing weekend. So this year will be Saturday, January 15th. That's our one annual fundraiser a year for our conservation fund. So generally, all of the funds that we raise are all solely from the raffle sales. So we'll have that going on that day. So we're going to cross our fingers for some sub-zero weather between now and then. We always have better turnout when you can drive vehicles on the ice and that kind of stuff. So we've got that coming up, and usually we're able to make somewhere in the neighborhood of $3,000 profit on that to help with fish stocking and habitat conservation. We do some other things with Firewise programs and some other conservation activities, but this fundraiser primarily is geared toward fish stocking, fish habitat. I think from that standpoint. So
Excellent. Thanks, Dave. Anything more? Thanks. I noticed that Jerry is with us through Zoom. Jerry, are you able to share with us any updates for the town, county, or Tri-Lakes? Also, I know that there's going to be a fishery done by the Snowmobile Club on Edenwald this year. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. Thanks, Jerry.
I have nothing to report on the town activities. Got some short-term rentals, those type of things keep going on, but nothing else other than Fritzl's will be closing, and that's going to create some inconvenience for a lot of our people. Gas will be an issue for the recreation people with snowmobiles and ATVs this winter. Sherwood is going to sell gas during regular business hours, and so will the lure. Other than that, got to go quite a ways to get it. Either Prairie Park, Ponderosa Pines is the next closest one. Yeah, there's a fishery being sponsored by the Rome Snow Bandits, and I believe that's the 23rd of January at the lure. I don't have that information at my fingertips. I should have, but I don't. But it should be a week after Sherwood's. When Dave was Sherwood's the week before that, right?
yeah, that Saturday that we'll have our fishery is January 15th.
So
maybe if it's the following Saturday, it might be the
22nd then.
Okay, it is 22nd.
So it'll be the 22nd.
Okay. Other than that, I have no other information on the town or the county.
Thanks, Jerry. Next item is confirm the next agenda dates and times. So the next meeting dates, and again, I'm going to be gone, but the dates, if we follow the second Monday of the month, the dates would be January 10th. And again, it's Scott Provost and Colton Hutchinson. They're going to talk about denitrification in the Leola ditch. Then February 14th would be the second Monday in Feb. And so I put together an agenda that talks about the to-dos for 2022, names and dates, and some pre-planning for those things, like executing the grants, building capacity, varied meeting schedule, as we talked about, putting together a meeting schedule, especially during peak season, whereby it more meets the needs of our community, so that they could also attend. And then on March 14th, again, it's a Monday, the second Monday, Pat Oldenburg from the DNR will be here talking about the TMDL and then what our part is in it, how it relates to our 9 kilometer, our 14-mile watershed group. So again, Barb has the agendas, Dave has a copy of them. Modify them as you want to. The speakers have been contacted, they're both available, and so sometime beforehand, reach out to them just to confirm the setup and all of that. So I think we're good with that. So any questions about those? Everybody good with the dates? Yeah, okay, good. Well, next item is I would ask for a motion for adjournment, and also because I will not see you guys before, but happy holidays, everybody.
So moved
Okay, second.
for adjournment.
For adjournment and for the holiday. Great. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your input.